My name is May, and my sister's is June. We were born in the same hour, and the story they tell of us now is a grand thing, full of struggle and triumph, but it did not begin that way. It began with an absence. We were not born to land or inheritance. We had no brothers to speak for us, no dowry to recommend us, and by the time we were 16, no roof that would have us. The world is not built for girls like that. It expects you to be a daughter or a wife. It has no room for a woman who is simply a woman, on her own 2 feet, answerable to no one but God and the dirt. Our story is different because it began where most stories are meant to end, with nothing. Our father was a good man, but a quiet one, and his silence was no match for the will of the woman he married after our mother passed. When fever took him, his new wife, our stepmother, did not wait for the ground to settle over his grave. She stood on the porch of the house we were born in, a house our father built with his own hands, and pointed down the road. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Her power was not in volume but in the cold, flat certainty of her ownership. The law was with her. The house, the land, the mule, it was all hers now. What was ours were the clothes on our backs and a small, worn leather pouch containing the sum of our father's savings. It was not a fortune. It was the careful accumulation of a man who denied himself small comforts, coin by coin, year after year. It felt as soft and thin as a moth's wing in my palm. We walked away from that house and did not look back. Looking back is a luxury for those who have something to return to. We had only the road ahead. We went to the county office, a dusty room that smelled of stale paper and finality. The man behind the counter, a Mr. Abernathy, looked at the 2 of us, 16 years old and standing there without a man to vouch for us, and his face was a study in pity and dismissal. We asked what land might be had for the sum in our pouch. He laughed, a dry, rustling sound. He pulled out a map, spreading it on the scarred wood of the counter. Most of it was marked with the names of the valley's powerful men. But there was one small parcel, a jagged little scrap of 5 acres tucked back in a cove the sun seemed to shun, that was unmarked. He tapped it with a thick finger. "There's that," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 100 years of inherited caution. "The blue pool lot. Nobody's wanted it since the county was surveyed. Folks say the water's poison." He looked from me to June. "It's what you can afford." He said it not as an offer, but as a judgment. We looked at each other. Poison was a word people used for things they didn't understand. We had been fed a diet of things we didn't understand for 2 years. We were not afraid of it. "We'll take it," I said. The sound of my own voice surprised me, its lack of tremor. June laid the pouch on the counter. The deed was signed, the coins were counted, and we walked out of that office as landowners. We owned 5 acres of poison ground. It was the first thing in our lives that was truly, entirely ours. We walked the 3 miles to the cove, the deed a stiff, important paper in my sister's hand. The road narrowed to a track, then to a deer trail that wound down through a thicket of shadow-dark pines. The air grew cooler, damp, smelling of deep earth and wet stone. And then the trees parted, and we saw it. The ground sloped down into a shallow bowl, and at its center was the spring. It wasn't a pool so much as a wound in the earth, a deep, unblinking eye of water. And it was blue. Not the pale, sky-reflecting blue of a clean creek, but a dense, impossible, unsettling color, like a piece of the midnight sky had fallen and melted into the ground. In the full sun, it held a turquoise vibrancy, but where the shadows of the pines fell across it, the color deepened to a bruised indigo. It was beautiful and it was terrifying. All around the spring, the ground was bare in a perfect circle, as if the land itself was pulling away in fear. No bird sang. The silence was absolute, a living thing. June knelt at the edge, her reflection a wavering ghost on the surface. She dipped her fingers in. I held my breath. She brought them to her nose, then touched the tip of her tongue to the water. I waited for her to shudder, to recoil. Instead, her face, always more serious than mine, softened with a kind of wonder. "It's just cold," she whispered. The water wasn't thick or oily. It was just water. Cold, clear. clear, and deeply, unnervingly blue. We had bought a mystery. That night, we slept on a bed of pine needles under the stars, the strange blue eye of our land watching over us. We had no house, no tools, no seed. We had 5 acres of fear and a spring the color of a dream. It felt, for the first time, like we had a chance. The world had cast us out, but we had landed on a piece of it that was ours alone to decipher. The work would be hard, but it would be our work. The risk would be great, but it would be our risk. And the water, poison or not, was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Our mother, gone 10 years by then, had been a woman of the earth. She didn't read books, but she read the land. Her hands, calloused and knowing, could coax life from the rockiest soil. She taught us the language of plants, the curl of a thirsty leaf, the yellowing that spoke of poor soil, the particular shade of green that meant a plant was happy. Her lessons were our only inheritance of any real value. Anything that grows, she used to say, her voice as steady as the sunrise, has a secret it's willing to tell, if you're patient enough to listen. Patience was her gospel. She would sit with us in the garden behind our first house, her finger tracing the veins on a cabbage leaf, explaining the world in a language of roots and sunlight. She believed the earth was honest. It might be hard, it might be unforgiving, but it did not lie. Men lied. Laws lied. But the soil, the water, the seasons, they told the truth, always. After she was gone, our father seemed to shrink. The light in him dimmed. He was a carpenter, a man who understood wood and nails and the solid certainty of a level line, but the architecture of raising 2 girls alone bewildered him. He did his best, but a sadness settled over our home like a fine layer of dust. Then came the stepmother, a woman named Agnes, whose smiles never reached her eyes. She saw us not as daughters but as burdens, another mouth to feed, another chore to be done. Her presence was a slow poisoning of the air. She spoke of our mother's garden as a waste of good land, of our quiet ways as insolence. When father was home, she was honey-sweet. When he was gone, her voice was a file, sharpening its edge on our girlhood. Her cruelty wasn't in blows, but in subtractions. A smaller portion at dinner. A cherished dress of our mother's, gone missing. The slow, deliberate erasure of the life we had known. When our father died, it was simply the final subtraction. We were what was left to be cleared away. That walk to the county office was the culmination of 2 years of being made to feel like ghosts in our own home. Buying the Blue Spring wasn't an act of defiance so much as an act of instinct. It was the only place that would have us. And as we stood there, on the edge of that strange, silent water, I heard our mother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside me. "Look close," she would have said. "The world puts its best secrets in the places no one else bothers to look." The first thing we built was a shelter, a crude lean-to of fallen pine boughs against a rock face. It was not a home, but it was cover. Then, we spent what little remained of our money. Not on comforts, but on tools and seed. A shovel, a hoe, a mattock. Packets of tomato, lettuce, and carrot seed. Simple things. Honest things. We cleared a small patch of ground, a good 50 feet from the spring, where the soil was dark and rich with leaf mold. The work was brutal. Our hands, soft from years of indoor chores under our stepmother's watch, blistered and bled. Our backs ached with a fire we had never known. But with every rock we hauled away, with every swing of the mattock that broke the compacted earth, we were not just clearing land. We were claiming it. We were writing our own story into the soil, line by painful line. For water, we had no choice. The spring was all there was. We filled our buckets, the water sloshing, a startling slash of cobalt against the galvanized steel. It felt like a betrayal of common sense, of every warning we'd ever heard. We were watering our hopes with poison. The first seeds went into the ground on a cool morning in late spring. June, ever the meticulous one, made the rows straight as a ruler's edge. I, the dreamer, dropped the seeds into the furrows, each one a tiny prayer. We covered them gently, patting the soil down like a blanket. And then we waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day we'd inspect the plot, searching for the first hint of green. For a week, nothing. The fear began to creep in, cold and sharp. Mr. Abernathy's dismissive laugh echoed in my ears. The whispers of the townspeople we'd overheard, poor girls. Bought the devil's baptismal font then, one morning, June shook me awake before dawn. She didn't say a word, just pointed. There, breaking through the dark earth, were hundreds of tiny, perfect green loops. The carrots. And beside them, the faintest hint of the first tomato leaves. A life that had not been there the day before. We had not poisoned the earth. We had given it a secret, and it was beginning to speak. The growth was not normal. We knew that within a fortnight. The carrot tops, usually delicate ferns, grew into a thick, lush forest of green. The lettuce, which should have been modest rosettes, formed heads so tight and heavy they looked like green cannonballs nestled in the dirt. But it was the tomatoes that truly defied belief. The vines didn't just grow, they surged. They climbed the stakes we drove for them and then kept going, reaching for the sun with a kind of desperate, joyful hunger. They were not just plants, they were declarations. We'd water them in the evening, hauling bucket after bucket of the blue water from the spring. The ground drank it in, and the next morning, it was as if we could see the growth that had happened overnight. The leaves were a deeper, more vibrant green than any I had ever seen, and the stems were thick and sturdy as a young sapling's trunk. The other farmers in the valley, men who had been working their land for generations, were struggling. A dry spell had settled over the region, and their creeks were running low. Their corn was stunted, their beans withering on the vine. We could hear the worry in their voices when we went to town for supplies, the tired lines around their eyes. Our cove, however, seemed to exist in a different world. Our spring never lowered by an inch. Its blue heart beat with a steady, constant rhythm. When the first tomatoes began to ripen, they were not the pale, pinkish red we were used to. They were a deep, lustrous crimson, heavy in the palm, and when you sliced one open, the scent was so rich and sweet it made your mouth water. The lettuce was crisp and cool, the carrots so sweet they tasted like candy. We ate like queens, feasting on the fruits of our impossible garden. We worked from sunup to sundown, our bodies growing lean and hard. The blisters on our hands turned to calluses. We learned the rhythm of the work, the language of the land. We learned to read the sky for rain, to feel the coming of a cool front in the ache of our bones. We were no longer just May and June, the cast-out orphans. We were farmers. And our farm was a miracle. The first person to see it was a boy from a neighboring homestead, sent to hunt for a stray calf. He stumbled out of the woods and stopped dead, his eyes wide. He was looking at our tomato vines, which had now formed a dense, green wall over 12 feet high, laden with fruit. He didn't say a word. He just turned and ran, as if he had seen a ghost. The story he told in town was of a jungle, a place of monstrous and unnatural growth. The whispers changed. They were no longer tinged with pity, but with a new kind of fear. The fear of the unknown. That fear soon found a voice. His name was Roman Hemlock, a man who owned half the valley and carried himself as if he owned the sun and the rain as well. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he mistook wealth for right. His own fields were suffering in the drought, his crops dusty and failing. The stories of our harvest must have grated on him like a stone in his shoe. He rode up to our cove one afternoon, his horse a magnificent black creature that seemed to take up all the air. He did not dismount. He looked down on us, on our small clearing, our linter, our wall of impossible green. His eyes, small and hard, took it all in. There was no admiration in his gaze, only a cold, calculating appraisal. "I hear you girls have had some luck," he said, his voice smooth and deep, a sound practiced in boardrooms and banks. Unusual luck. June stood beside me, her shovel held loosely in her hand. She said nothing. Her silence was always more formidable than my speech. "That water," he continued, nodding toward the spring. "My grandfather told me stories. Said it was tainted." Unholy. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. But it seems to be doing something for your tomatoes, he smiled then, a thin, predatory curving of the lips. I'll make you an offer. For the good of the community, you understand. This land, it's not fit for two young ladies. It's dangerous. I'll give you $500 for the deed. Enough to get you to the city, find proper work. A new start. The offer was so large it was meant to sound like kindness. But the coldness in his eyes made it sound like nothing else but a threat. $500 was a fortune. It was a way out. It was safety and comfort and an end to the back-breaking labor. It was everything we were supposed to want. I looked at June. Her jaw was set. I looked at the tomato vines, their leaves shimmering in the sun. I looked at the blue spring, our strange, silent partner. This was ours. We had made it. No one was going to take it from us. I looked back up at Roman Hemlock, high on his fine horse. It's not for sale, I said. His smile vanished. His face hardened into a mask of offended pride. You'll regret that, he said, his voice no longer smooth. He yanked the reins, turning the horse so sharply it threw up a spray of dirt. This valley doesn't take kindly to witchcraft. He rode away, leaving the threat to curdle in the quiet air. The word spread through the valley like a contagion. Witchcraft. Unnatural. Tainted. The whispers grew louder, more hostile. People who had once offered a hesitant nod in town now turned their faces away. We were no longer just oddities, we were a danger. The drought worsened. The valley grew brown and brittle. Our cove remained an island of impossible green. Hemlock, true to his word, began his campaign. It started with rumors, dark tales whispered over fences and in the general store. He spoke of blight, of how our unnatural harvest would surely poison the very soil of the valley. He hinted that the blue water was a curse that would spread, that our presence was an affront to God and nature. Some people, desperate and fearful, listened. Our trips to town became ordeals. Stones were sometimes thrown, not to hit, but to intimidate. The word witches was hissed from shadowed doorways. We learned to walk with our heads high, to meet their glares with a quiet calm we did not always feel. Inside, a cold fear was taking root. We were alone, two girls against a valley's worth of fear, stoked by its most powerful man. Then Hemlock escalated. A notice was posted on the door of the county office, a lawsuit filed in his name. It claimed our use of the spring constituted a public nuisance, that its unnatural properties were a threat to the downstream water table. It was nonsense, but it was legal nonsense, written on official paper, and it carried the weight of authority. We were summoned to a hearing. The night before, we couldn't sleep. We sat by the spring, the water glowing faintly under the moonlight. The silence of our cove felt different, fragile, as if the angry noise of the world was about to shatter it. What will we do? I whispered, the words barely audible. June didn't answer for a long time. She was watching her reflection in the blue water. Then she turned to me, her face illuminated by the moon. We'll do what Mother taught us, she said, her voice firm. We'll tell the truth. The earth doesn't lie. The next morning, we harvested. We filled a wagon, borrowed from the one old man in the valley who still showed us kindness, with our finest produce. Tomatoes the size of a man's fist, shining like polished jewels. Heads of lettuce so crisp they sang when you touched them. Carrots, scrubbed clean, glowing with an inner orange light. We drove the wagon to the courthouse, a small, stuffy room packed with the grim, angry faces of our neighbors. Hemlock was there, sitting at the front like a king, his lawyer beside him. Mr. Abernathy, the county clerk, presided, his face etched with discomfort. Hemlock's lawyer spoke first, a torrent of words about contagion and unnatural phenomena and the sacred duty to protect the valley. He painted us as reckless girls dabbling in forces beyond our understanding. Then, it was our turn. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I looked out at the sea of hostile faces. I saw the fear, the suspicion. And then I looked at the wagon, parked just outside the open doors, its contents glowing in the morning sun. I didn't speak of law or rights. I spoke of soil, of seed, of water and sun. I told them about our mother, about her lessons. I described the work, the blisters, the ache in our backs. I held up one of our tomatoes. "This is not witchcraft," I said, my voice gaining strength. "This is a tomato. It grew from a seed, in the earth, with water from our spring. We are not witches. We are farmers." Then June stood. She walked to the back of the room and brought in a basket. She didn't say a word. She just walked down the aisle, offering a tomato to each person. At first, no one moved. Then, Old Man Hemmings, the valley's most respected elder, a man whose family had farmed this land for a century, reached out a trembling hand and took one. He looked at it, turned it over, then bit into it like an apple. The room was silent. We all watched him. Juice ran down his chin. His eyes, clouded with age and suspicion, widened. A look of pure, unadulterated astonishment washed over his face. He chewed slowly, then swallowed. He looked at Roman Hemlock, then at the rest of the room. "In all my 80 years," he said, his voice raspy but clear, "I have never tasted such a thing. This ain't poison. This is life." That was it. The spell was broken. A murmur went through the crowd. One by one, others reached for the fruit. The tension in the room dissolved, replaced by the sounds of eating, of quiet, astonished murmurs. Roman Hemlock sat there, his face ashen. His power had been built on fear, and in the face of a simple, undeniable truth, it had crumbled into dust. Mr. Abernathy looked at the tomato in his own hand, then at us. He cleared his throat. "Case dismissed," he said. The victory in the courthouse was not a loud one. It was a quiet turning, like a river changing its course. The change in the valley was just as slow, just as sure. It began with Old Man Hemmings. The next day, he appeared at the edge of our cove, not on a fine horse, but on his own 2 feet, holding an empty bucket. He didn't say much. "My well is nearly dry," he said, his gaze fixed on the blue spring. "My wife. She's been Eileen. I'd be obliged if I could have some of that water." June and I looked at each other. We had guarded our secret, our miracle, so fiercely. But our mother's voice was there again, whispering about patience, about sharing the earth's truths. June took his bucket and filled it to the brim with the vibrant blue water. He thanked us, his eyes full of a hope I hadn't seen in any of our neighbors' faces for months. He was the first. Soon, others followed. A woman whose child was wasting away. A farmer whose prize cow had gone dry. They came hesitantly at first, with a mixture of fear and desperation, their buckets held out like offerings. We gave the water freely. We never asked for payment. It was not ours to sell. It was the spring's gift. The stories began to trickle back. Old Man Hemmings' wife, bedridden for a month, was now sitting on her porch. The farmer's cow was giving milk again, richer than before. The sickly child had a flush in her cheeks. The blue water was not a poison, it was a tonic. It was life. One day, a man arrived in a buggy, a stranger to the valley. He was a professor of botany from a university back east, a man with spectacles and a kind, curious face. He had heard the wild tales of our farm and had come to see for himself. He spent a week with us, his notebook always in hand. He tested the water, the soil, the leaves of our plants. He was a man of science, of Latin names and chemical compounds, but he looked at our garden with the same wonder as the boy who had stumbled upon it. On his last day, he sat with us by the spring. "The water," he said, his voice full of academic excitement, "is rich in minerals I've only ever read about. Copper, cobalt, and a dozen others in trace amounts. They're not poison. In these concentrations, they're catalysts. They supercharge the biological processes in the plants, and it seems, in people and animals as well. It's not magic. It's geology. A geological miracle. He gave us a language for what we already knew in our bones. He published a paper. Our little cove, once a place of rumor and fear, became a destination. Scientists came, then doctors, then simply people, looking for healing, for a taste of the life that bloomed so fiercely in our soil. We never sold the water, but we sold our produce, and we prospered. One day, a young man named Thomas came, not with a bucket or a notebook, but with a wagon full of stone he had cut himself. He was a stonemason, quiet and steady, with hands that understood hard work. He didn't ask for water. He asked if we needed help building a proper house. He had watched us, he said, for months. He admired our grit. He courted June not with words, but with labor, with the solid, honest sound of his hammer and trowel. He built us a house of stone, with a roof of glass over the part that would be our greenhouse, so the blue light of the sky could fall on the seedlings below. He built it to last. He stayed. Our lives found a new rhythm, one not of survival but of cultivation. The farm expanded. We cleared more land, not with the frantic energy of our first year, but with the steady, patient strength of people who knew their purpose. Thomas's hands, strong and sure, joined ours. He built stone walls around our fields, not to keep people out, but to hold the good soil in. He built a spring house, a beautiful, simple structure of grey stone and glass, where the blue water pooled before we channeled it to the fields. The light falling through the glass roof onto the water was a constant, silent sermon on the nature of beauty. June and Thomas married. Their love was like their work, quiet, steady, and productive. It wasn't a romance of whispered poetry but of shared burdens, of glances across a field, of the simple comfort of a presence you could count on day in and day out. I found my own partnership, not with a man, but with the work itself. I became the keeper of the seeds, the student of the spring. I learned to read the subtle shifts in the water's color, to know which minerals were more present in which season, and how they would affect the different plants. I corresponded with the professor from the university, trading observations for knowledge. Our farm became a school. People came not just for the water anymore, but to learn. They came to learn our methods of crop rotation, of composting, of listening to the land. We taught them what our mother had taught us, that the earth is honest, and that its secrets are available to anyone with the patience to look. Even Roman Hemlock's story found its final, ironic chapter. He lost his land, piece by piece, his wealth crumbling without the foundation of fear to support it. One day, years later, his daughter, a young woman with his dark hair but none of his arrogance, came to our farm. She came to learn. I saw her standing in our tomato fields, her hands gentle on the leaves, and I felt no triumph, only a quiet sense of the world turning right. The valley healed. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, communal respect for the strange blue spring that had once been its darkest secret and was now its most cherished resource. Our home, once a crude lean-to, was now a sprawling homestead, always full of the sounds of work, of learning, of life. We were no longer the outcasts. We were the heart of the valley. We had taken the one thing no one wanted and made it the foundation of everything. And so, here I sit, an old woman now, my hands gnarled and stained with the same soil that gave me my life. June is gone. Thomas too. Their children and their children's children now work this land, their hands as knowing as my own. The spring is still here, its blue heart beating as steadily as it did on that first day. It has outlasted us all. I look at my hands, at the map of my life written in their creases and calluses, and I think about that girl of 16, standing in a dusty office with a handful of coins and a world of fear before her. I think of her, and I think of you. The world will tell you what is valuable. It will point you toward the fertile fields, the easy ground, the places where success is expected. It will warn you away from the rocky soil, the strange waters, the things it does not understand. It will build its fences and draw its maps and tell you where you are allowed to go. And I am here to tell you, the most valuable things are often in the places no one else has bothered to look. Your poison might be your medicine. Your greatest weakness, your lack of privilege, your outsider status, the thing that makes you different, might be the very source of your greatest strength. Don't be afraid of the blue water. Don't be afraid of the ground that others have deemed worthless. That is where the miracles are buried. That is where you will find the space to grow something the world has never seen before. Go to the places that frighten you. Buy the land nobody wants. Trust the things you know in your bones over the wisdom of powerful men. Be patient. Listen. The earth is honest. It does not lie. And it is waiting, always, to tell you its secrets. You just have to be willing to do the work, to get your hands dirty, to offer your own small seed of hope to the strange, beautiful, and unknown ground that is yours alone to claim.